For 40 years, the U.S.-led global economy has produced an enormous improvement in human welfare. Since 1981, the proportion of the world's population living in extreme poverty on less than $1.90 per day has fallen from 42% to 10%. But in countries with advanced economies, inequality of income and wealth has surged.
Ladies and gentlemen, please make some noise for...
The word of society is derivation of the French word société, which came from the Latin word societas that bring the meaning of friendly association with others. Meanwhile, society in sociological terms defined as a group of people who live in dependable community and share the same culture. On a wider scale, society consists of people and institutions. They also share the same belief and political authority. And according to sociologist Gerhard Lanskin in 1934, he defined societies in terms of their technological applications. In other words, society is very important for every nation. This is because it was the foundation of nations, and without society, the nation cannot be full and developed.
Economic inequality is the unequal distribution of income and opportunity between different groups in society. It is certain in almost all countries around the world, and often people are trapped in poverty with little chance to climb up the social ladder. The idea that economic inequalities are socially corrosive has been around for decades.
Many developed countries in the world now have gross domestic product growth every year. It stands to reason that people should live a better life, but in fact, life anxiety has kept increasing. This is because modern people's material standards are sufficient for food and clothing. Therefore, the expectation of life has changed from the needs of life becomes compared to others. An economist Richard Layer put forward an experiment. Imagine there are two worlds for you to choose. The first world, you earn 50,000 a year and the others earn 25,000. While in the second world, you earn 100,000 a year and the others people earn 250,000 a year. It turns out the most people will choose the first world. Although you actually earn less, you can earn more than others. This means that people care more about social status compared to others. This mentality of caring about evolution of others reflects the anxiety of entire society. Socialists surveyed the people's psychology in the developed European countries and found that in countries with a large gap between rich and poor, everyone is more anxious about social status regardless of income. This means that in an inequality society, people are more worried about the evolution of others. Psychologists assemble this kind of anxious of stressful evolution as a social evolution trait. Therefore, the gap between rich and the poor brings more anxiety and pressure to the whole society. World Organization estimate that more than 350 million people worldwide suffer from depression. They compared 12 rich countries and found that the society with a higher prevalence of mental illness and a larger gap between the rich and the poor. For example, the ratio of the United States to the United Kingdom is 3 times that Japan to Germany. In recent years, many of the public figures who have come out to talk about their depression experience are come from American or British. For example, Lady Gaga, Ellen DeGeneres, Robin Williams, James Eugene Carey, and Colin James Farrell. Mental illness will be affected by social gradient. That is, with each step down, the higher the proportion of mental illness. In the United Kingdom, the rate of depression among men at the bottom is 35 times that of men at the top. Some researchers will explain that the reason of depression always occur in the lower classes of unequal society. This is because when we refer back to the history of human evolution, the weaker primitive people will surrender and admit they were inferior to avoid harm when they quarrel with the strong class. Generally, social inequality has caused many people to lose their autonomy in life and finally caused the onset of mental illness. At the same time, it also reflects that the greater the gap between the rich and the poor in a country, the easier it is for people to feel that what happens in their life is not their own. Studies establish a positive relationship between economic inequality and crime. Their surveys conclude that inequality is the single factor most closely and consistently related to crime. Disadvantaged members of a society may be more likely to suffer from resentment and hostility as a result of their economic position or competition over a scarce job, resulting in a higher propensity for criminal behavior. Besides, economic inequality also increases the incentive to commit crimes. For instance, few methods of lawfully obtaining resources are available for the increasing number of poor who live in an unequal society. Even when the risks of punishment are taken into account, illegal methods of gaining assets may provide better returns than legal means of obtaining resources.
The society that lives in a country that has an economic inequality system will face the injustice of the government system. This is because most political systems will completely be controlled by the influential and the wealthy. That means people who have money will be able to get a position in administrations of the country even if the country adopts a system of electoral leadership. This considers with the word of the busy people that money can buy everything, and public vote for leadership are not exceptions. There will be various problems arise if government vote based on the money, such as misappropriation of national income sources, neglect of duty as a leader, corruption, and so on. The adverse effect of this act will directly affect to society. Higher taxation is one of the effects caused by the economic inequality system. Taxation is defined as the collective of money or financial obligation imposed on each citizen or resident by taxing authority, usually a government. Taxation applies to all types of voluntary collections, from income to capital gains to property taxes. The most basic function of taxation is to finance government spending used to support the ruling class, increase troops, and build defense. But higher taxations will cause many bad effects that occur to societies, which are inadequate incomes, low jobs, and low wages. Many people will lose their job and business goes bankrupt because they cannot afford to operate government imposed high business taxes on them. A few businesses that are still safe will opt to reduce the number of their employees to reduce salary payment, and these ones happened in South Africa in 2019. South Africa was recognized as the country with the highest unemployment rate in that year. The price of goods such as food necessities will also increase due to this higher taxation. Property rights determine the ownership of resources theoretically and legally and how they can be used. Those resources can be tangible or intangible and can be owned by individuals, business, and government. One example of the biggest property ownership is land ownership property. Land ownership will not be denied if it has been registered under a valid law, such as the National Land Code 1965 in Malaysia. However, this method does not effective in a country that is controlled by the economic inequality system. Before obtaining a certificate of land ownership, a reasonable amount of money must be paid, such as first-year tax, premium land survey fees, registration fees, registration of registered title document, and amendment to ground level land premiums. Those payments are usually able to be financed by the community by continue to be under the unjust ruler, it becomes a burden of payment that is too expensive and they have to let go of that land fraudulently. One of the ways to overcome the economic inequality system harm society is by ending residential segregation. Residential segregation is the separation of two or more socially defined groups in a residential space. Traditionally, segregation is done according to the type of races, as the case in our country, Malaysia, during the colonial era, but nowadays, residential segregation is more to the income level of the society. This means the richest group live in a luxury residential area. Meanwhile, the poor group live in the low-cost housing areas. Due to this, the injustice of the economic system to society happen. So, the most appropriate way to overcome this problem is to end the segregation of the residentials and creating an affordable residential area for all regardless of income level. This will allow all groups to get along with each other. Differences between standards can also be avoided as they have better understanding each other.
Is a policy that encourages higher saving rates and lower the cost of building assets for working and middle class households can provide better economic security for struggling families. New programs that automatically enroll workers in retirement plans and provide a saving credits or a federal match for retirement savings account could help lower income households build wealth. In addition, access to fair, low-cost financial services and home ownership are also important pathways to wealth.